Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Attaining the Second Cognition. Our intended goal in these presentations is to provide our viewers with insights that should be beneficial to their cognitive growth, as we have found them beneficial to our own cognitive advancement. By presenting the information we do, it is our intent that our viewers broaden their perceptions to learn what binds their consciousness without their even being aware of these bindings, which leads us to the topic of this discussion: how traditions bind your consciousness. Wherever you go in the world, you will find people who form their tribal, national, or cultural identity through shared traditions. In many cases, these traditions are thousands of years old, and people simply follow these traditions because that is the way it has always been where their thinking and perception is concerned. Admittedly, new traditions can arise within a specific group of people at any time. Whether it is a tradition based on race, political ideology, religious, or cultural cohesion, whenever some new group forms and creates a tradition to which its adherents will attach their own identity. What must be noted about traditions is that they are, in essence, tribal in nature. Traditions are erected to keep herd solidarity. When we look at the nature of the Hapim virus and its mandate to form its infected hosts into consolidated hives or herds, then we can start to understand how and why traditions are formed. Traditions bind people into specific herds, and traditions also keep people forever bound to the past, keeping humanity always trapped in time by traditions often formed so long ago that few even remember where they originated. Traditions create a form of herd cohesion, or what some call socialization. Traditions are tools once devised by the Anunnaki gods to ensure that their human herds paid homage to their mandates created through their temple cultures around the world. These same Anunnaki gods created laws to manipulate the behavior of their human slaves because humans, both now and in the past, can't seem to comport themselves without laws mandating how they should act. From the gods, the creation of laws was handed down to their regional managers, called priests, and eventually passed on to their kings, which the Anunnaki gods also claimed credit for creating. Within specific religions, to this day, people adhere to presumed laws handed down by their gods, and these ages-old religious mandates also influence and control modern political lawmaking. There are those followers of the Pauline Christian doctrine that firmly believe that the Ten Commandments are a mandate of laws by their presumed Almighty God. Yet these 10 rules of behavior should be common sense application that no mandate of any God for humans to live by. Most of these 10 commandments refer to behavior based on no trespassing, which, after a few thousand years since their creation, humanity still has not learned to abide by. For those who try to follow these commandments, we must ask that if they were not believed to be handed down by their God, whether they would adhere to the no trespassing tenets at all. Why should such common sense behavioral guidelines have to be mandated by law for people to live by these tenets? Can't people learn not to trespass without some god, priesthood, or politician mandating it into law? This is a serious question I ask all of you listening to this presentation to give some serious thought to. Do you really need some law to be in place to comport yourself as a civil human being that doesn't trespass on other people? Do you really have to have the threat of punishment in place before you can exhibit common sense and learn to mind your own business instead of everyone else's? These are questions I ask you to seriously ponder. In India today, there are people killing other people because they think they may have eaten beef, because their religious tradition of cow worship, which just happened to be started by the Anunnaki goddess Ninhursag, mandates that all cows are sacred. This is a tradition that goes back before the establishment of written history. It is at the least close to 5,000 years old since Ninhursag took on the role of the miraculous cow of plenty, Kamadhenu, and mandated that cows were hers and that humans could not touch her bovine possessions. This is just one extreme example of how an ancient and useless tradition binds the consciousness of those who still believe this ancient religious tradition, and also why, to this day, men will kill other men over such beliefs. The example just given illustrates very keenly how tradition binds human herds through belief systems, and also how these herds are totally willing to kill anyone who violates their tradition or challenges them too stringently. Every people on the planet is controlled by one form of tradition or another. They do things because that is the way things have been passed down to them, and most follow these traditions without question, for to go against them sets the individual up for social ostracizing by the larger herds. Within the Hapim-infected mind, hive or herd compliance controls mass consciousness. Because the virus thrives on external validation and recognition, adhering to traditions becomes a form of cognitive control by which the Hapim-infected human herds identify themselves, as well as using these traditions as a form of personal identity shaping. The Hapim-infected human embraces traditions as part of its individual identity, as well as its identification with a specific herd. Traditions are part of the glue that binds Hapim hives together in their collective tribal consciousness. This glue, or traditions, also keeps people always connected to a mythical past through which the individual identifies with to shape their own form of cognitive slavery. Through controlling the perceptions about our history and controlling the mythology of any particular culture, we always find holidays or individuals commemorated to keep us bound to a past with which we have no real basis to genuinely identify. In the USA, people celebrate the 4th of July as a national holiday, as it commemorates the momentous event of a time when Americans won their freedom from the British king. In Russia, May 1st is the day they commemorate the success of their glorious revolution by the Bolsheviks. In France, they remember Bastille Day as a day of national celebration, with few people knowing that when the Bastille doors were opened, only 7 prisoners actually walked out. These events are only 100 to 300 years old at most, yet they now control the fabric of consciousness of those who pay homage to these holidays. These are only some recent examples of how events are turned into traditions to control the consciousness of new herds formed by revolutions. Another more recent example of establishing new traditions to create herd binding through ethnicity is the creation of Kwanzaa, which was designed by African Americans to celebrate their heritage and to give some a separate holiday to compete with Christmas. I'm not criticizing the creation of Kwanzaa, but I'm using it as another example of how specific groups of people create their own traditions to generate herd solidarity and bolster the Hapim-infected minds of their followers. In this regard, Christmas or Easter for Christians, or the Hajj for Muslims, are no different. Each of these holidays, or shall we say holy days, since one word is adapted from the other two, create not only a sense of herd unification with others who believe in and participate in these traditional practices, it also forms part of the personal identity of the Hapim virus in one's own mind. Once a tradition, any tradition, becomes locked in place, it is nothing but a harness on one's consciousness. To stand in awe of these traditions and to allow them to rule your mind only makes you a cognitive slave to the traditional beliefs in the herds of humans who embrace them. Other methods of traditional cognitive binding are found with national mottos like Rule Britannia, or Vive la France, or God bless the USA. Each of these slogans serve as a harnessing mechanism on the minds of those who believe these sloganeered tenets. They inspire patriotism, which itself is just another form of herd cognitive control, and by which Hapim-infected individuals have gone to war and killed each other throughout time. To stay mired in tradition is to admit that your own personality, or more accurately, the personality of the Hapim ego, is controlled by the mass consensus of whatever herd traditions you bow to. When you can see how traditions actually hold your mind enslaved to a group endorsement of what is sacred, then you should be able to understand how even things as simple as traditions escape our notice as weapons of control over our consciousness. As an active, Soika-oriented, free-minded individual, you must ask yourself, are any of these traditions really what shapes who you are? Do you require these traditions to reinforce your personal identity with your countrymen or religious or political compatriots? Must you run with the herd and bow to these traditions? If so, then you must ask yourself why you feel the need for these traditions to define who you are. When you realize that traditions are only binding spells on the consciousness of humanity, then you are one step closer to moving into cognitive freedom. I ask all of our viewers to contemplate the questions put forth in this video and analyze your own answers internally. If you can finally realize that traditions are part of what binds your consciousness into a Hapim herd mentality and let these internal personal definitions of the Hapim virus go once and for all, then you are that much closer to escaping the world of perception that blinds you to its control. I would like to thank all of our viewers and subscribers for taking time to push themselves forward to find their cognitive freedom. Until next time, stay the course and don't give up on yourself.